Jin had always believed he could handle anything life threw at him. Growing up in the narrow streets of Seoul, he learned early that asking for help was a sign of weakness. His father had taught him to stand on his own 2 feet, to work with his hands and to never burden others with his problems. For 20 years, Jin ran a small electronics repair shop on the ground floor of his apartment building. It wasn't much, but it was his. The morning of September 15th started like any other. Jin opened his shop at 8, greeting the familiar faces in his neighborhood. Old Mrs. Hana from upstairs waved as she passed by, carrying her daily shopping bag. She reminded him of his late grandmother, always smiling, always humming old folk songs. At 82, Hana had lived in the building longer than anyone else. Her husband had passed 5 years ago, and her only daughter lived in America, too busy with her own life to visit often. The weather forecast had mentioned rain, but nothing prepared them for what came next. By noon, the sky turned an ominous shade of green. The wind picked up, rattling the old windows of the building. Jin thought about closing early, but he had a customer's tablet to finish repairing. He decided to stay. The storm hit at 2 in the afternoon with a fury nobody had expected. Typhoon Sana tore through the district like an angry beast. The rain came down so hard it sounded like bullets hitting the roof. The wind howled through the streets, picking up anything that wasn't nailed down. Inside his shop, Jin watched in horror as water began seeping under the door. Within minutes, everything changed. The power went out. The ceiling above him groaned and sagged. Then, with a crash that shook the entire building, part of the roof collapsed. Water poured down the stairwell like a waterfall. Jin's first thought wasn't about his shop or his equipment. It was about Hana upstairs. He fought his way up the flooded stairs, calling her name. He found her in her apartment, sitting calmly at her kitchen table despite the chaos around her. Water dripped from a hole in her ceiling, but she seemed more worried about the wet photo albums scattered on the floor than her own safety. "We need to leave," Jin shouted over the noise of the storm. Hana shook her head, clutching a framed picture of her late husband. "This is my home," she said quietly. "I can't leave." For the next 8 hours, they huddled together in Jin's apartment, which was on the 2nd floor and slightly less damaged. The storm raged through the night. When morning came, the building looked like a war zone. Half the roof was gone, exposing their homes to the sky. The 1st floor was completely flooded. Jin's shop was destroyed, 20 years of work reduced to soggy electronics and mud. The electricity was out across the entire district. The water system had failed. Cell phone towers were down, leaving them completely cut off from the outside world. But the real horror was yet to come. By the 3rd day, Hana's medication was running out. She was diabetic and needed insulin to survive. Jin had managed to save some of his emergency money from the flood, but the local pharmacy was closed. The few stores that had reopened were charging emergency prices for basic supplies. Jin watched helplessly as Hana grew weaker. Her hands shook when she tried to eat. She slept most of the day, her breathing shallow and labored. He tried everything he could think of, walking to distant neighborhoods, asking every person he met if they had insulin, even attempting to trade his father's watch for medicine. Nothing worked. The city's emergency services were overwhelmed. Ambulances couldn't get through the flooded streets. The hospitals were packed with more critical cases. Officials told them to wait for help that never seemed to come. On the 5th day, Jin made a decision that went against everything he'd been taught. He swallowed his pride, borrowed a working phone from a neighbor 3 buildings away, and did something he'd never imagined himself doing. He took a photo of Hana sleeping in her chair, looking fragile and small. With shaking hands, he typed a message on a social media app he barely knew how to use. "Please help," he wrote. "My elderly neighbor needs insulin. Our building was destroyed in the typhoon. We have no power, no clean water. She's getting sicker every day. I don't know what else to do. We're at building 247 on Maple Street. If anyone has medicine or knows where we can find some, please come. We don't have much money, but I'll work to pay you back somehow." He stared, at the message for a long time before hitting send. His father's voice echoed in his head, telling him that real men didn't beg. But as he looked at Hana's pale face, he realized that sometimes being a real man meant putting aside pride to save someone you cared about. The phone was almost dead by the time he posted the message. He handed it back to his neighbor and walked slowly back to his apartment, feeling like he'd just exposed his deepest shame to the world. He had no idea that within minutes his simple plea for help would set off a chain of events that would change everything, in ways both wonderful and terrible that he couldn't have imagined. As he sat beside Hana's chair that evening, holding her cold hand, Jin whispered the words he'd never said before. "Help is coming, I promise." He just hoped it was true. Jin barely slept that night. He kept checking the borrowed phone, but the screen remained dark. Maybe no one had seen his message. Maybe no one cared. He tried to prepare himself for the worst, watching Hana fade away while he stood by helplessly. Around 6 in the morning, soft knocking interrupted his thoughts. He stumbled to the door, half expecting another neighbor with bad news. Instead, he found Minho, the young pharmacist from 2 districts over. The man was soaked from the rain, carrying a waterproof bag. "I saw your post," Minho said breathlessly. "I brought insulin." Jin stared at him in disbelief. Why would you?" "My grandmother has diabetes too," Minho explained. "I couldn't sleep knowing someone else's grandmother needed help." Behind Minho stood a woman Jin didn't recognize. She introduced herself as Dr. Jia and explained she'd driven 3 hours after seeing his message shared on her medical school group chat. She wanted to check Hana's condition. Within an hour, their damaged apartment filled with strangers who felt like angels. Mrs. Yoon, a widow from the next neighborhood, arrived with homemade soup that was still warm. She'd cooked it at 5 in Tew, the morning after her daughter showed her Jin's post. "Food is medicine too," she said, setting up a portable camping stove in their flooded kitchen. "You both look too thin." As the morning progressed, more people arrived. Young Tae, still in his university uniform, brought bottled water and basic medical supplies. He explained that his study group had collected money to buy emergency supplies for flood victims. "We're just students," he said, "but we wanted to help somehow." The heiress, a young couple with 2 small children, knocked hesitantly at the door. They couldn't offer money or medicine, but they had a spare bedroom in their apartment across town. "It's not much," Ari explained, bouncing her baby daughter on her hip. "But it's dry and we have electricity. The children would love having a grandma around," her husband added, smiling at Hana. By noon, Jin felt overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers. His phone, a replacement given by one of the visitors, buzzed constantly with messages. People were sharing his post, adding comments of support, offering help. "I have extra blankets," one message read. "My father is an electrician. He can help." "With temporary wiring," said another. "My food truck is mobile." "Where exactly are you? I'll bring fresh meals." Dr. Jia checked Hana thoroughly and declared her stable but needing rest and proper nutrition. She left detailed instructions and her phone number. "Call me anytime," she insisted. "I mean it." As the day progressed, their small apartment became a hub of activity. Volunteers organized supplies, medical professionals took turns checking on Hana, and neighbors shared information about other flood victims who needed help. Jin felt emotions he hadn't experienced since childhood. Relief washed over him as Hana's color returned. Gratitude made his chest tight. But also confusion. Why were these strangers helping them? "I don't understand," he confessed to Minho as they sat outside the apartment that evening. "You don't know us. Why are you doing this?" Minho smiled, looking tired but content. "My pharmacy was damaged too, but not as badly as some places. When I saw your message, I thought about my own grandfather. He helped so many people during his life. Maybe this is how I carry that forward." The evening brought more surprises. A local restaurant owner, Mr. Wan, arrived with his teenage son, both carrying containers of food. "We had to close because of the flood," he explained, "but we still had ingredients." Throwing them away while people are hungry felt wrong. His son, June, couldn't stop staring at his phone. Dad, the post has been shared 500 times now. Look at all these comments. Jin looked at the screen, struggling to read the small text. Messages poured in from across the city, the country, even from other countries. People were tagging friends, sharing similar stories, offering resources. This is getting bigger than we expected, June said, his eyes wide. There are people organizing supply drives, making spreadsheets of who needs what. As night fell, Jin counted 12 people who had visited that day. Hana had taken her medicine, eaten real food, and smiled more than she had in weeks. The spare bedroom at the heiress place waited for them, a temporary home while their building was repaired. But something felt different now. Jin's phone showed hundreds of messages, friend requests, shares of his original post. Groups were forming online. Typhoon Sana Relief, Seoul Flood Support, Neighbors Helping Neighbors. I just wanted help for one sick old lady, Jin murmured. Scrolling through the notifications, Tae, who had stayed to help organize supplies, looked up from his laptop. Sometimes that's how big changes start. One person asking for help, one person willing to give it. Jin nodded, but a small worry nagged at him. The attention felt good now, but he wondered if it might become too much. For tonight, though, he pushed the thought away. Hana was safe. They had help, and tomorrow they would start rebuilding. He had no idea that tomorrow would also bring news crews, competing volunteer organizations, and the kind of attention that would transform their quiet plea for help into something much more complicated. The third day started early with a knock that sounded different from the gentle taps of the day before. Jin opened the door to find a man with a camera and a woman holding a microphone. "I'm reporter Kim from Channel 5 News," the woman said with a practiced smile. "We heard about your story and wanted to share it with our viewers." Before Jin could respond, another car pulled up, then another. Within an hour, 3 news crews had gathered outside their damaged building. Neighbors peered from their windows, curious about the commotion. "This feels wrong," Hana whispered to Jin as they watched the cameras set up below. "We just needed medicine, not all this attention." Jin agreed, but he didn't know how to make it stop. The reporters were friendly enough, asking questions about the typhoon, their struggles, and the kindness of strangers. But something about being filmed made his skin crawl. Around noon, the first volunteer convoy arrived. 5 cars packed with supplies pulled up in front of the building. A group calling themselves Soul Helping Hands had organized overnight after seeing the news coverage. Their leader, Mr. Bay, was enthusiastic but clearly inexperienced. "We brought everything we could think of," he announced proudly. "Food, clothes, blankets, toys for children." "We don't have children here," Jin tried to explain, but Bay wasn't listening. He was already directing his volunteers to unload boxes upon boxes of supplies. Within minutes, chaos began. Different volunteer groups arrived throughout the day, each with their own ideas about what was needed. The Youth Emergency Response Team brought canned goods and insisted on setting up a soup kitchen in the flooded first floor. Mothers Against Disaster arrived with baby supplies for a building with no babies. "Excuse me," Jin tried to tell one volunteer, "we already have enough blankets." "Nonsense," the woman replied, stacking more blankets in their hallway. "You can never have too many blankets in a crisis." By afternoon, their building was clogged with well-meaning people who kept bumping into each other. Some volunteers wanted to take photos with Hana for their organization's social media. Others insisted on interviewing Jin about his inspirational journey. The different groups began to compete. When Soul Helping Hands set up a donation table, Community Care Coalition placed their table right next to it, claiming a better spot. Both groups loudly explained to reporters why their approach was superior. "We focus on immediate needs," Bay insisted, gesturing dramatically to his pile of supplies. "But we address long-term solutions," countered Ms. Cho from Community Care. "These people need sustainable help, not just handouts." Jin watched in bewilderment as the two groups argued over who understood his situation better. Neither had asked him what he actually needed. The worst moment came when a volunteer accidentally knocked over Hana while reaching for a photo opportunity. The elderly woman stumbled, catching herself against the wall. Jin helped steady her, his anger finally boiling over. "Stop," he said firmly. "Everyone, please stop." But his voice was lost in the noise. More volunteers kept arriving. Someone had shared their location online with a call-to-action post that spread like wildfire. Groups from neighboring cities began showing up with supplies of their own. Theory. Reporters loved the drama. They filmed everything. The competing volunteers, the growing pile of supplies, the confusion. Jin overheard one journalist telling her cameraman, "This is perfect. The chaos makes it more interesting than just a simple rescue story." By evening, their hallway was blocked with donated items nobody had organized. Canned food mixed with children's toys. Winter clothes sat next to summer sandals. Boxes of supplies were labeled for other disaster sites, but had somehow ended up here. Tae, the student who had helped from the beginning, looked exhausted. He'd spent the whole day trying to coordinate between different groups, but no one listened to him. "I thought helping would be simpler," he admitted to Jin. "Everyone wants to be the hero of the story." The heirs who had offered their spare room came by in the evening looking worried. "We're not sure if this is the right time," Ari said hesitantly. "With all these people around, maybe Hana should stay here?" Jin understood. The story had grown bigger than anyone expected. They were no longer just neighbors helping neighbors. They had become characters in everyone else's version of a rescue story. That night, Jin's phone buzzed constantly with notifications. New groups were forming online, each claiming to be the official support network for typhoon victims. Some were legitimate organizations trying to help. Others seemed more interested in publicity and donations. A message made him pause. "Congratulations on your viral story. We'd like to offer you a partnership opportunity. Our company specializes in disaster relief marketing." Jin stared at the screen, feeling sick. Marketing? When had their desperate plea for help become a marketing opportunity? Hana, who had been unusually quiet all day, finally spoke up. "Jin, I'm tired," she said softly. "Not tired. I mean tired of all this." Jin looked around their apartment, now crowded with boxes they didn't need and filled with the constant sound of people who meant well, but didn't understand. The simple kindness of that first morning, Minho bringing medicine, Dr. Jia checking, Hana, Mrs. Yun making soup, felt like it had happened years ago. "Maybe we should go to the heiress's place tomorrow," he suggested. Hana nodded. "Before more reporters come?" As they prepared for bed, Jin reflected on the day. He was grateful for the help, truly grateful. But something had changed. The more people tried to help, the less helpful it became. Everyone wanted to be part of the story, but no one asked what the story actually needed. Tomorrow, he decided, he would find a way to take back control. He had to, for Hana's sake and for his own sanity. The fourth day brought a rain that seemed to match Jin's mood, heavy and relentless. He woke up at 5 in the morning to the sound of his phone buzzing nonstop. Overnight, someone had created a fundraising page using photos from the news coverage. The page had already collected over 1,000,001. Jin stared at the screen, confused. He hadn't authorized this page. The photos were from news broadcasts, and the story contained details he'd never shared, including some that weren't even true. "Hana, look at this," he said, showing her the phone. "They're saying you're dying." Hana, who was actually feeling much better thanks to her medication and proper food, squinted at the small text. "But I'm not dying, I just needed my medicine." Around 7, Dr. Jia arrived for her daily checkup. She looked troubled. "Jin, have you seen the social media pages about you? There are at least 5 different fundraising campaigns now." She showed him the screens. Each page told slightly different versions of their story. One claimed Jin was homeless and starving. Another said Hana had been abandoned by her family. A third page showed photos of a completely different destroyed building. "Someone's using your story to make money," Dr. Jia explained. "And worse, they're making up details to get more donations." By 8 o'clock, Jin had received dozens of messages from people asking about the fundraising pages. Some were angry, accusing him of fraud. Others were confused about which page was legitimate. "Which charity are you really with?" demanded one. Message: "There are too many and I don't know who to trust." The situation got worse when competing volunteer groups arrived. Soul Helping Hands came early, claiming they had first rights to organize relief efforts at the building. But Community Care Coalition had already set up their station the night before. "We were here first," Bay insisted, pointing to their equipment. "But we're more qualified," Ms. Cho shot back. "We have professional social workers." Jin tried to mediate, but both groups largely ignored him. It was as if he'd become a prop in someone else's drama. Then came the morning news. A reporter from a different channel than the previous day stood outside the building with a very different angle. "Questions are being raised about the authenticity of this viral rescue story," she announced to the camera. "Multiple fundraising pages have appeared, but none seem connected to the actual victims. Are disaster stories being exploited for profit?" Jino watched from his window as neighbors began to look at him with suspicion. Old Mrs. Park from downstairs approached him with an angry expression. "Is it true you're making money from this mess?" she asked. "My grandson told me there are thousands of dollars being raised in your name." "I don't know about any of it," Jin replied honestly. "I just wanted help for Hana." But Mrs. Park didn't look convinced. By noon, Jin noticed people whispering when he passed by. The weight of their stares felt heavier than the floodwater had been. The breaking point came at lunchtime. A new group of volunteers arrived, this time from another city entirely. They'd driven 4 hours after seeing a viral video on social media. "We brought medical supplies," their leader announced, "for the elderly woman who's dying alone." "She's not dying alone," Jin protested. "She's sitting right there eating lunch." The volunteers looked confused. The video they'd seen showed Hana looking extremely sick, with dramatic music and text claiming she had hours to live. But the video had over 1 million views, one volunteer stammered. It said she needed emergency surgery. Jin felt something snap inside him. He took out his phone and searched for videos about their situation. What he found made his stomach drop. Someone had edited together clips from various news reports, added emotional music, and created several emergency videos about Hana's condition. One video had 2 million views and hundreds of comments like, "Praying for grandma," and "This is so sad, sharing to help," but it was completely fabricated. "This is insane," Jin muttered, scrolling through dozens of similar posts. Someone had even created a fake Instagram account using Hana's photo, posting updates she'd never made. The final straw came when a reporter approached him with suspicion. "Sir, we've discovered several inconsistencies in your story," she said accusingly. "The fundraising pages show different amounts of money needed. Some claim you have insurance, others say you don't. Can you explain these discrepancies?" "I can't." "Explain them because I didn't create them," Jin replied, his voice rising. "All I did was ask for insulin for an old woman. I never asked for money, I never asked for all this." But the reporter seemed more interested in a scandal than the truth. "So you deny involvement in the multiple fundraising schemes?" By afternoon, online comments had turned nasty. People accused Jin of running a scam, of coaching Hana to look sicker than she was, of orchestrating the whole situation for profit. "These people make me sick," read one comment. "Probably destroy their own building for sympathy." Jin's family members who lived in other cities began calling. His cousin was worried. People at his work had seen the news and were asking questions. "Jin, what's really going on?" his sister asked. "People are saying you're some kind of disaster profiteer." The stress was unbearable. That evening, as Jin and Hana sat in their damaged apartment surrounded by unwanted donations and unwanted attention, he made a decision. "Tomorrow," he told Hana, "I'm going to fix this. I'm going to tell everyone the truth and ask them all to go away." Hana nodded, looking as tired as he felt. "I just want it to be quiet again." "It will be," Jin promised, though he wasn't sure how he'd make that happen. As they prepared for bed, Jin noticed a message from Minho, the pharmacist who had been the first to help. "Hey, I saw the news. Don't listen to what people are saying online. I know you're a good person. If you need anything real, call me. Not for cameras or posts, just to help. Jin smiled for the first time that day. At least some people remembered what this was really about. Jin woke up before dawn, feeling something he hadn't felt in days. Clarity. He knew exactly what he needed to do. While Hana still slept, he sat at his damaged kitchen table with borrowed paper and began writing by candlelight. The sun was just rising when he posted his message on the same platform where it all began. This time his words were measured and firm. My name is Jin. 1 week ago I asked for help finding insulin for my neighbor, Mrs. Hana. That simple request became something I never intended. Today I want to set things straight. First, thank you to everyone who genuinely helped us. Dr. Jia, Minho the pharmacist, the Aris family, young Tai, and many others. Your kindness saved Hana's life and restored my faith in humanity. However, I need to address the chaos that followed. Multiple people have created fundraising pages using our photos without permission. Videos have been made with false information about our situation. We never asked for money. We never claimed to be dying or homeless. I'm asking all media outlets to stop covering our story. I'm asking volunteer organizations to help other victims who truly need assistance. We are grateful, but we need space to heal. Effective immediately. Any fundraising page claiming to represent us is unauthorized. Please don't donate to them. If you want to help disaster victims, please donate to established relief organizations directly. Again, thank you to those who helped when we truly needed it. To those who used our situation for other purposes, we forgive you, but ask you to please leave us in peace. Jin and Hana. Within minutes, responses poured in. Many were supportive. People shared similar stories of online charity scams. Others apologized for doubting him, but most importantly, the overwhelming noise began to quiet down. Dr. Jia was one of the first to call. I'm so proud of you, she said. That was exactly what needed to be said. By midday, the fake fundraising pages had been reported and taken down. The people exploiting their story moved on to new opportunities. News crews packed up their equipment and left for fresher stories. The real volunteers, the ones who genuinely cared, remained. Tay arrived in the afternoon looking sheepish. I'm sorry it got so crazy, he said. I should have spoken up sooner. When all those groups started competing. You're just a student, Jin replied. None of this was your fault. You've been helping since day one. Slowly, quietly, they began to actually solve problems instead of creating more drama. Minho helped Jin contact his insurance company properly. The Aris family renewed their offer of temporary housing, now that the media circus had moved on. Dr. Jia introduced them to Nari, a professional social worker who specialized in disaster recovery. Unlike the amateur volunteer groups, Nari understood what Jin and Hana actually needed. Your biggest challenge now isn't finding help, she explained. It's learning how to accept the right kind of help and reject the wrong kind. Nari taught them practical skills, how to deal with insurance companies, how to find legitimate repair contractors, how to protect their privacy online. She helped them create a simple plan for rebuilding their lives without the spectacle. Within a week, the attention faded as quickly as it had appeared. Their story became old news. The reporters moved on to cover other disasters. The competing volunteer groups found new causes to champion. But the genuine helpers stayed. Minho continued to check on Hana's health. The Aris family became real friends, inviting them for family dinners. Dr. Jia visited every few days, not for publicity but because she cared. Jin and Hana moved into the Aris' spare room temporarily. It was quiet there. The children loved having Grandma Hana around, and she enjoyed teaching them old songs and card games. 2 months later, when their building was finally repaired, Jin reopened his shop. He'd learned valuable lessons about electronics during the disaster. Water damage could be fixed with patience and the right techniques. But more importantly, he'd learned about human nature. Standing in his new shop, looking at the customers who'd returned, Jin reflected on everything that had happened. The genuine kindness had been real. The pharmacist driving across town, the doctor coming to help, students pooling their money for supplies. But so had the chaos. People turning their crisis into content, using their pain for profit. Hana, whose health had fully recovered, often visited the shop in the afternoons. Sometimes visitors still recognized them from the old news stories and asked questions, but they'd learned to politely redirect the conversation. The typhoon taught us many things, Hana would say. The most important was to distinguish between those who help because they care and those who help because it makes them feel good about themselves. Jin nodded. Both types of people aren't evil, he would add. But when you're drowning, you need someone who can actually swim, not someone who just wants to be seen jumping in the water. 6 months later, Jin received a message from someone new, another person whose life had been destroyed by a different disaster, asking for advice about handling online help. Jin spent an hour writing back, sharing what he'd learned. Start small. Thank people privately first. Trust your instincts about who really wants to help versus who wants to be part of a story. Set boundaries early. Remember that your crisis is not content for other people. As he finished typing, Jin smiled. Perhaps some good could come from their chaos after all. Not through viral videos or fundraising pages, but through quietly helping others navigate the strange new world where asking for help could become a public spectacle. Outside his shop, life in the neighborhood had returned to normal. Children played in the streets. Vendors called out their daily specials. And Jin had learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from handling everything alone, but from knowing when to ask for help, how to accept it gracefully, and when to say, enough. The storm had passed, both outside and in their lives. What remained was stronger than before, not because it had resisted the wind, but because it had learned to bend without breaking.